The peaceful suburb of Maplewood had always been the kind of place where people felt safe leaving their doors unlocked. Tree-lined streets, well-kept lawns, and friendly neighbors created an atmosphere of quiet comfort. It was the perfect community for families, retirees, and anyone looking to escape the chaos of city life. David Carter fit right in. A divorced father in his late 40s, he worked as an accountant at a local firm. Steady, reliable, and unremarkable in the best way. He kept his house immaculate, his hedges neatly trimmed, and always had time to chat with neighbors over the fence. When a neighborhood organized block parties or charity drives, David was the first to volunteer, often arriving with a tray of homemade cookies or a cooler of drinks. Parents trusted him, elderly residents appreciated his help with groceries, and even the local kids liked him because he never yelled when a stray ball landed in his yard. But beneath the surface of this model citizen lurked something far darker. In July 2012, the first cracks in Maplewood's peaceful facade began to show. Sarah Mitchell, a 28-year-old waitress at the town's diner, failed to come home after a late-night shift. Her roommate reported her missing the next morning when Sarah didn't answer her phone and her bed remained untouched. At first, people assumed she had stayed with a friend or maybe even left town on a whim. Sarah was known to be independent and free-spirited. But when her car was found parked near a secluded stretch of woods just outside town, abandoned with her purse still inside, the community's concern turned to fear. Police launched a search, combing through the dense forest and questioning everyone who had seen Sarah last. Witnesses remembered her leaving the diner around midnight, waving goodbye to co-workers before heading to her car. A gas station clerk a few blocks away recalled seeing her talking to a man near the parking lot, but couldn't give a clear description, just that he was middle-aged, average height, and wore a baseball cap. Detectives went door to door, speaking with neighbors, including David Carter. He seemed genuinely concerned, even offering to help put up missing posters around town. He told officers he had been home all night, watching TV before going to bed early, a claim his security cameras appeared to confirm. There was nothing suspicious about him, nothing that stood out. But as the days passed and Sarah remained missing, investigators began noticing odd details. David was always outside when patrol cars drove by, often working in his yard or taking out the trash at the exact times officers were in the area. It was almost as if he was keeping track of their movements. Then came the gas station clerk's statement. The man Sarah had been speaking to that night was wearing a cap just like the one David often wore. A background check revealed no criminal history, but neighbors started remembering small, unsettling things. The way David sometimes stared a little too long at young women walking by. The odd hours he kept, with lights on in his basement late at night. The way his friendly smile never quite reached his eyes. By the time detectives obtained a search warrant, the entire town was watching. What they would find inside David Carter's home would shatter Maplewood's illusion of safety forever. This response is AI-generated, for reference only. The search of David Carter's home began like any routine investigation. Police moved methodically, careful not to miss any detail. The first floor revealed nothing unusual, just the neat, slightly dated furnishings of a middle-aged bachelor. The kitchen was spotless. The living room orderly with its recliner positioned perfectly before the television. Even the bedroom gave no immediate signs of anything sinister, though officers noted how meticulously everything was arranged, as if staged for display rather than lived in. Then they descended to the basement. The air grew colder as they reached the bottom of the stairs. Unlike the upstairs, this space felt different, less curated, more functional. A washer and dryer sat in one corner, while storage boxes lined the walls. At first glance, it appeared completely ordinary. But Detective Lisa Reyes noticed something off about one section of paneling near the back. The wood grain didn't quite match, and when she pressed against it, there was the slightest give. A sharp push revealed the hidden door. Behind it lay a small storage room, no larger than a closet. The space smelled of mildew and something metallic, a scent Reyes recognized immediately. A single bare bulb illuminated shelves lined with carefully labeled plastic bins. Inside the first, officers found newspaper clippings spanning nearly a decade, each documenting missing women from 3 different states. The articles were meticulously organized by date, some with handwritten notes in the margins. The second bin contained maps, local at first, then expanding to regional roadways. Red circles marked remote areas, state parks, abandoned farmhouses, stretches of wooded backroads. Some locations had dates written beside them that corresponded with disappearances. But it was the third discovery that turned the investigation from disturbing to undeniable. A small wooden box, tucked beneath the bottom shelf, held an assortment of jewelry, cheap rings, a locket, several bracelets. One piece stood out, a silver charm bracelet with a tiny coffee cup pendant. Sarah Mitchell's co-workers immediately identified it as hers, a gift from her grandmother that she wore every day. As forensic technicians documented the evidence, one officer made the find that would haunt the entire department. Behind a stack of old paint cans, nearly invisible in the dim light, was a narrow crawl space. The opening was just large enough for a person to squeeze through. Inside, the space widened slightly, revealing a blood-stained tarp spread across the dirt floor. Above it, strands of hair, some long and dark, others blonde, had been pressed into the wooden beams, as if placed there deliberately. A single notebook sat in the center of the tarp, its pages filled with cramped, methodical writing. The journal entries began as mundane daily accounts, groceries purchased, yard work completed. But interspersed between these ordinary notes were others, written in a different, almost excited hand. Descriptions of hunting trips and special collections. Detailed accounts of conversations with women at gas stations, diners, bus stops. And most chilling of all, numbered lists with dates and locations that matched several unsolved missing persons cases across 3 counties. By the time detectives finished cataloging the evidence, one thing had become horrifyingly clear. David Carter hadn't just killed Sarah Mitchell. He had been practicing his craft for years, hiding in plain sight as the friendly neighbor everyone trusted. And judging by the notebook's final entry, a single sentence written just 2 days before Sarah disappeared, he had been planning his next move carefully. Time to start a new collection. The arrest of David Carter sent shockwaves through Maplewood, but the real horror was just beginning. As detectives peeled back the layers of his life, they uncovered a chilling pattern that stretched far beyond their quiet suburb. Records showed Carter had moved to Maplewood 5 years earlier from the neighboring state of Illinois, where he'd lived in 2 different towns. Both places where young women had vanished without a trace. In the first town, a college student named Emily Rios disappeared after leaving her waitressing job in 2005. Her case had gone cold, despite an extensive search. The second town saw 2 disappearances, a young mother named Jessica Lang in 2008 and a high school senior, Danielle Poole, in 2010. Both cases shared eerie similarities with Sarah Mitchell's. The women vanished after night shifts, their cars were found abandoned, and there were no signs of forced abduction. Police in those jurisdictions had never connected the cases to each other, let alone to the mild-mannered accountant who had lived quietly among them. Detectives tracked down Carter's ex-wife, Karen, who had divorced him abruptly in 2003 after 7 years of marriage. Speaking from her new home in Florida, her voice trembled as she described the man she thought she knew. He was always so controlled, she said. Everything in its place, everything on schedule. At first I thought it was just how he was meticulous, but over time, she noticed disturbing patterns. David would fly into terrifying rages over minor things. A dish left in the sink, a light left on, only to become eerily calm moments later, insisting she must have misunderstood his reaction. The final straw came when Karen found a locked filing cabinet in David's home office. When she managed to open it, she discovered photographs of women, strangers, taken from a distance as they went about their daily lives. Some are labeled with dates and locations. Terrified, she packed her bags that night and never looked back. I didn't go to police, she admitted. He convinced me I was imagining things, that I was the unstable one. By the time I realized the truth, I just wanted to get away. Back in Maplewood, forensic analysts made a breakthrough. DNA collected from the bloodstained tarp in Carter's crawl space matched samples from all 3 unsolved cases in Illinois. The hair strands recovered from the beams included samples consistent with Emily, Jessica, and Danielle's hair types. Investigators realized with dawning horror that Carter hadn't just kept trophies. He'd preserved pieces of his victims in his hidden chamber. Most disturbing was the journal's contents. Carter had documented his crimes with clinical precision, detailing how he selected his targets. Always women who lived alone or had unstable family situations, people whose disappearances might not raise immediate alarms. He wrote about his methods of approach, his techniques for gaining trust, and his satisfaction when they finally realized, too late, that the friendly neighbor they knew was someone else entirely. Yet for all the evidence piling up, one critical question remained unanswered. Where were the bodies? The maps found in Carter's basement suggested possible burial sites, but searches of the marked areas turned up nothing. Without remains, prosecutors feared some charges might not stick. Then, on the morning of Carter's bail hearing, a package arrived at the police station, addressed to the lead detective with no return address. Inside was a single Polaroid photo showing a wooded clearing, with coordinates written on the back in familiar handwriting. The image showed just enough of the landscape for investigators to recognize it as part of a state forest 30 miles north of Maplewood, an area circled on one of Carter's maps. As a search team prepared to depart, the detective noticed something else about the photo. In the corner, barely visible beneath a layer of leaves, was what appeared to be a scrap of fabric, the same shade of blue as the sweater Sarah Mitchell had been wearing the night she disappeared. The coordinates led investigators to a remote section of Blackwater State Forest, an area so thick with undergrowth that searchers had to move single file along the narrow game trails. The summer heat hung heavy between the trees as the team fanned out, their boots crunching over dead leaves and fallen branches. Then a shout cut through the quiet. A young deputy had spotted disturbed earth near a cluster of birch trees, the soil slightly sunken in a rectangular pattern. As forensic technicians carefully brushed away layers of dirt, the first signs of fabric emerged, a faded blue sleeve matching Sarah Mitchell's diner uniform. The excavation revealed her body wrapped in a tarp identical to the one found in Carter's crawl space, her hands bound with the same type of nylon cord stock to the hardware store where David had worked part-time. But the real horror came when the medical examiner lifted the tarp. Nestled against Sarah's side was a small, dirt-caked metal box. Inside the box, investigators found 7 Polaroid photos, each sealed in individual plastic bags to preserve them from the elements. The images showed women in various states of distress, their faces frozen in terror. 3 were immediately identified as Emily Rios, Jessica Lang, and Danielle Poole. Their poses identical, bound to the same wooden chair in what appeared to be Carter's basement. The 4th photo made detectives pause. A woman no one recognized, her image dated 2 years before Emily's disappearance. The final 3 photos formed a chronological nightmare. The first showed Sarah Mitchell conscious but disoriented, her eyes wide with dawning realization. The second captured her mid-struggle, the cords cutting into her wrists as she twisted against them. The third was different, taken outdoors at night, Sarah's lifeless body arranged almost reverently beside the freshly dug grave, her hands folded over her chest. On the back of this last photo, Carter had written a single word in meticulous script: perfection. Back at the station, analysts made another chilling discovery. The unknown woman in the 4th photo matched the description of a missing nurse from Ohio, a case predating Carter's known residences by nearly a decade. This revelation sent detectives scrambling through old missing persons files across multiple states, cross-referencing dates with Carter's employment records. They uncovered a disturbing trail. Everywhere David Carter had lived or traveled for work, women had vanished under similar circumstances. The timeline suggested his crime spanned at least 15 years, with potential victims in 4 states. Meanwhile, forensic botanists studying the burial site made a critical observation. The roots of nearby saplings showed signs of having been cut and replanted. When investigators returned to examine the area more thoroughly, their probes struck something solid 6 feet west of Sarah's grave. The second excavation uncovered a makeshift coffin containing 3 skeletons arranged in a grotesque circle, their bones carefully cleaned and polished. Dental records confirmed they were Emily, Jessica, and Danielle, finally bringing closure to families who had waited years for answers. The most unsettling detail emerged during autopsy. Each victim's hyoid bone was fractured in the same precise manner, a signature of manual strangulation performed by someone with anatomical knowledge. Detectives recalled Carter's brief stint as a mortuary assistant in his 20s, a job that would have taught him exactly where to apply pressure. As the scope of Carter's crimes became clear, prosecutors faced an impossible question: how many more graves lay undiscovered in the forests of his past? The Polaroids suggested at least one earlier victim, but the journal's cryptic references to practice runs hinted there could be others. Then, on the eve of trial, guards reported Carter whispering to himself in his cell. When they listened closer, they realized he wasn't speaking. He was counting. The numbers started at 7, then 8, then 9. The trial of David Carter should have been an open-and-shut case. With a mountain of physical evidence, the victim remains, and his own meticulous journals, conviction seemed certain. But no one anticipated how Carter would use the courtroom as his final stage. Dressed in neat sweaters with his graying hair carefully combed, he looked more like a kindly professor than a serial killer, a calculated persona he maintained throughout the proceedings. When prosecutors displayed crime scene photos, Carter studied them with detached interest, occasionally nodding as if approving their presentation. As surviving family members gave victim impact statements, he took notes in the same precise handwriting found in his journals. Only once did his mask slip, when Sarah Mitchell's sister described how Sarah had planned to go back to school to become a teacher. Carter's pen froze mid-word, his knuckles whitening around the pencil before he carefully resumed writing. Then came his unexpected decision to testify. Under oath, Carter spoke calmly, his voice never rising above a conversational tone as he described his crimes with chilling specificity. He recalled each victim's last moments in vivid detail, the exact shade of Emily's nail polish chipping as she struggled, the way Danielle's graduation tassel had brushed his arm when he led her to his car. His testimony wasn't a confession so much as a lecture, delivered with the pride of a craftsman discussing his life's work. The courtroom froze when he revealed his collection had indeed started earlier than investigators knew. 9, he said simply, when pressed about the counting guards had overheard. But you'll only ever prove 7. A recess was called when Danielle's father lunged at the defense table, screaming obscenities until bailiffs dragged him out. In his closing argument, the prosecutor held up the last Polaroid of Sarah Mitchell in her shallow grave. This wasn't just murder, he said. This was obsession. This was a man who turned human lives into his personal artifacts. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. At sentencing, the judge gave Carter 7 consecutive life terms without parole, 1 for each confirmed victim. As the gavel fell, Carter did something unexpected. He turned to face the gallery where victims' families sat, not with remorse, but with the faint smile of someone who'd won. Then he mouthed 2 words that left investigators sleepless for weeks: happy hunting. In the years since, detectives have chased leads across 5 states, trying to identify Carter's hinted-at earlier victims. Every few months, he receives visitors, sometimes journalists, sometimes law enforcement, always hoping he'll slip up and reveal more. He never does. The only clue came in a letter Carter mailed to a true crime podcaster last year. Inside was a single sheet of paper bearing a hand-drawn map of a forest with no identifying landmarks. At the bottom, written in that familiar neat script, was a phrase that still haunts investigators: